Today, I want to talk about the legendary tier super heavy cruiser USS Alaska, which received a buff in this update. A buff that I submit to you it did not need. Nevertheless, Wargaming saw fit to buff the Alaska because they say it has been greatly overshadowed by other legendary tier cruisers, so they decided to give its capabilities a slight enhancement across the board. I'll put up a screenshot of what the buff entails. Basically, the main battery firing range was increased slightly by zero point 0.15 kilometers, so 16 to 16.15. Main battery reload time was reduced by 2 seconds base, which is a pretty substantial buff, I would say, to the DPM, even though it might not sound like it. The hull HP and HP distribution was improved. The overall ship HP was increased from 54,720 to 60,800, which, take another extra salvo and not be too concerned about it. But the bow HP redistribution means that the bow section, the stern section, the casemate, and the superstructure all have less HP in them than they used to, which means they'll essentially saturate quicker and you'll take less damage when you get hit on those parts of the ship, and they just happen to be the most vulnerable parts of the ship. So the ship should be quite a bit tankier than it was previously. And then finally, the sonar duration was improved, as well as the detectability of ships by sonar and the detectability of torpedoes. So this all adds up to make Alaska a very strong cruiser at Legendary tier. It was previously, it is certainly now. Just ask this Napoli, who is a viewer of the channel, exactly how strong he thinks the Alaska is. Let's see, one Citadel, 16,000 damage for our opening salvo of this game. And I should talk a little bit about how this game came to be and why I'm putting it on YouTube, actually. I think it just shows the power of the Alaska's guns, especially when you position it fairly well, and when you exercise patience, which is a universal value in this game, and often rewards you if you can be patient. We're going to be quite patient for this match, but you might have noticed if we looked at the leaderboard or the team lineup that this game contains a lot of familiar names, including Beautiful Muse. She was streaming at the time and doing count-ins, which is how I got in this game. I'll leave a link to her channel in the description because I know a lot of you out there enjoy watching World of Warships Legends streams and you enjoy getting in the games on count-ins. Muse is definitely one of the people who does that, so you might want to check out her channel. In any case, we're hanging out here in the USS Alaska near the Alpha Cap, and it's been a while since I've played this ship or talked about it in any capacity. So it's good to know sort of what this ship's MO is. It's basically a super heavy cruiser with battleship levels of firepower. It has 9 guns. They are 305mm guns, which technically is a battleship caliber of guns because you can find the same size on the German Tier 7 battleship Odin. And I want to say there's another one that has the same gun size, Brandenburg, perhaps? There might be more that I'm forgetting. There's so many ships in this game now. But in any case, these are battleship-sized guns. However, they are American cruiser guns, so they've got the super heavy AP with improved penetration angles, and they are absolutely lethal when you get them to land on broadside cruisers and they hit the Citadel. That shot there against the Napoli shows what I think is really the only sort of downside of the Alaska, which is that the accuracy I don't think is the typical cruiser accuracy. You can see the shells disperse very widely. And so sometimes you'll get these sort of frustrating salvos where not a lot of damage is really done, but sometimes when you get the broadside of a Napoli who is turning, well, that's enough to take him out. That's like a 20k salvo right there with 2 Citadels, and we're up to 58,000 damage done at the beginning of this game with the first kill. And all of that damage was done against the Napoli. So this thing is a very effective cruiser killer. It also can deal a tremendous amount of damage to broadside battleships. The pen is very good, it's almost battleship level. And then on top of that, the Alaska has a 10 km radar, which is the reason we were hanging around that cap. We didn't have full radar coverage of the cap, but the friendly destroyer was attempting to take it. However, it's been revealed the enemy destroyer is over near the Charlie Cap, and that's where we're headed next. Our work here at Alpha is done. Our teammates should be able to take it, but things are not necessarily going well over here on the Charlie side. Enemy Shimakaze has been spotted south or north of the Charlie Cap, rather, on the broadside of some of our teammates. Beautiful Muse, in fact, in the Minotaur, spotted the Shimakaze because she is, of course, running the Chad radar minnow build, but she goes down, unfortunately. So we're going to have to take her place as the radar cruiser on this side of the map. And of course, we know about the radar, we know about the sonar. The Alaska also has some pretty robust armor. The bow and stern are only 27 millimeters, so of course they can be overmatched by anything with 16-inch guns. The superstructure is pretty big, so it can take a lot of pens as well, although the HP redistribution has been done, so it probably takes less damage than it did previously. But the side armor, it's got a belt that's thick enough to bounce even Yamato caliber shells. And the upper belt armor is 28 millimeters, meaning you can at least theoretically angle it against 16-inch battleships and not take a lot of damage, although anything above that will overmatch that thin strip of side plating. So this is a very tanky cruiser with excellent AP that can deal a lot of damage to both battleships and cruisers. It's also pretty stealthy too. Although, to be fair, we are using Beepley as our commander, so that's why we've got our concealment down to 10.4. He can't get it quite that good without Beepley, but the radar range and the concealment range is close enough that pretty much anytime you get spotted with Beepley at the helm, you can pop radar a few seconds later and be reasonably confident that you'll spot the destroyer responsible for revealing you. So this makes it a ship with great utility and great firepower. The only place where it's really lacking is DPM, so even if you can radar a destroyer, you're maybe not always going to be able to take it out just because your reload is so slow. But providing the destroyer's location via radar to your teammates provides a lot of utility. And we've still got the Shimakaze lurking around here somewhere, and at some point, I think we are going to end up radaring him. Meanwhile, though, we should point out the state of the game because the blue team has managed to take both Alpha and Bravo. The Reds only hold Charlie, and for the most part, the Reds are concentrated in the Charlie cap, pushing toward Bravo and Alpha. So they're at the disadvantage because that is the part of the map that our team occupies and they're pushing into us, which means it should be fairly tricky for them to do. Now the Shimakaze, by the way, is somewhere near us. You saw we briefly got spotted there. Of course, we get spotted again, and the Shima actually gets picked up by the Daring. Shima, I think, is instantly going to smoke up, but oh, you see there, the Citadel shot against the Montana, actually, who is 13.5 kilometers away from us as the Shimakaze goes down, thanks to HMS Daring. That just shows you the firepower of this. Now, of course, the Montana has a pretty easily accessible Citadel, so maybe not that big of a surprise, but the follow-up salvo there still did 10K. This thing has a tremendous amount of firepower. It's kind of a happy medium between the cruiser and the battleship playstyle, and it's a ship with great utility. I don't really think it needed to get buffed. I think previously it was buffed compared to what it was as it was released, because this was one of the original 3 legendary tier ships, along with Yamato and Grossa Kurfürst. And even back then it was pretty powerful, but Wargaming buffed it shortly after release, and I thought it was in a great state at that time. Now it's in an even better state. So if you're like me and you haven't really played this particular cruiser in a couple months, maybe even years, Well, you might want to take it out for a spin again because it really has been improved. And although we didn't get to see the tankiness of this ship because of our positioning being quite stealthy, quite deliberate, and quite patient, we really didn't take a lot of damage. If you do find yourself in a position where you are getting shot at more than I did in this game, you should find that you are a little less easy to sink, or you're a little more difficult to sink, rather. You should be able to survive for quite a bit longer. In any case, this game is coming to an end, so I'll give you sort of my thoughts on why they buffed this ship. They did say it's overshadowed by other legendary tier cruisers, but I think that might just speak to there are other legendary cruisers that have been released in this game, and people are playing those more often, so it's really only newer, more inexperienced players getting a hold of the Alaska, and so the numbers have sort of fallen. I don't think this ship required a buff. I think this is sort of a light skill buff, the same way the Colbert's buff was so many months or even a year ago when Wargaming said that the ship with the highest theoretical DPM in the game simply didn't have a lot of damage done during battles or enough battle impact, so they had to buff it. I think sort of the same story might be going on here with the Alaska, but I don't think it's necessarily overpowered or anything like that. It's just a very, very strong legendary tier cruiser that is certainly worth playing, and if you don't have it, it's worth starting the Bureau project and grinding it. The game ends there with our shot against USS Salem, so we poetically get both the first and last kill of the game. We end with a respectable 146,000 damage and 2,600 base XP. Not a bad game in the Alaska, and the Alaska itself, very strong after the buff. Well worth pursuing if you don't have it, and well worth checking out again if, like me, you haven't played it in a long time. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.